Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So in this video we're going to learn about data types and understand and use variables and constants. So let's get started. So what is a data type? So a data type defines the kind of data that a variable holds. So a variable is just a name that can be attached to a data type so it can be called upon later on in the program. So for example, if you want to refer to the value of pi multiple times in your program, you don't have to keep typing in 3.1415, etc. You can just name a variable named pi and give it the value of pi, and then later on you can just say, for example, like 9 multiplied by pi, and then you'll just get the value of pi substituted with the variable. So it's useful when you're trying to use the same value multiple times. And also a data type determines the type of value that is held within the variable, and also dictates the operations that can be performed upon it. So if your data type is an integer, so integers store numbers, so if it's an integer then you can perform arithmetic on them. But if it's a string, so a string is just a string of letters or characters, then you can't add a sentence, for example, onto a number. You can't do that, you'll get an error. Okay, so let's continue now. So these are some common data types, alright? So I've already mentioned integers and strings. So an integer is a whole number, so negatives and positives. But remember, you can't have decimal numbers, only whole numbers. So you can have anything like -1000, but you can't have like 1.7. So if you want to have decimal numbers, then you have reals, or as we refer to them when we're programming, as floats. Some programming languages also have this variable called doubles. We'll just discuss about it in a second. So floats can hold decimal numbers. So you can have the value of pi, as we've just discussed, to a certain extent, and then also you can have anything like 7.92 or anything. And then as I was talking about doubles, so doubles are useful when you want to store large decimal numbers. So if you want really high accuracy, then you use doubles. But in Python you don't have doubles. Floats will take care of the doubles function as well. Alright, and then you have booleans. So these just hold a value of true or false. This is very useful when you're trying to work with if statements and while statements. If you don't know about these concepts, then don't worry, because we're going to cover them later on in this series. And also you have two other data types. And then you have character, which is just a single letter or a symbol. So you can have, for example, as you can see over here, A3 or a dollar symbol. You have to keep in mind that it's just a single letter or a symbol. So you can't have, for example, A plus or -3. And you should also remember, if you have numbers within it, then it won't be the same as an integer, okay? Because it's just considered to be a letter at that stage. So you can't perform, not a letter, it's considered to be a symbol. So you can't perform arithmetic on it. So you can't just say an integer plus a character. You can't get anything out of it. You'll just get an error. And then you have strings, which is similar to character, as it's just a sequence of characters. So it's just a sequence of letters or symbols. So you can have a sentence, for example, that will be a string. So now let's move on to how to write data types inside of a variable. So a variable, as I was talking about on the second slide, it's just something that can hold some data. So it can hold essentially any data type. So you have to give your variable name space equals and then preferably another space and then write your value. And in Python, the value that you give in defines the data type. So for example, if you have age equals 25, as you can see over here, the computer will know it's an integer because it's not a decimal place. It doesn't have a decimal number because it's not a decimal number, and it also doesn't start with double quotes or single quotes or end with single quotes or double quotes. Alright, so your computer knows that it's a integer. And then for floats, it will know it's not an integer because it doesn't have, because it has a decimal point. And also for booleans, some might think that why are booleans recognized as not being strings because it's a sequence of characters. Well, that's because it's not between single quotes or double quotes. So for characters and strings, as you can see over here, you can start with a double quote or a single quote. But for booleans, you always have to start with a capital letter, so a capital T or a capital F if you're trying to write false, and then you're not supposed to add in any other characters, so you're not supposed to start or end with double quotes. Alright, and next, characters. Python won't really tell you if it's a character. It will just automatically usually take it as a string. Alright, but this is a way that you can do it if you just want to see an example, so to say. And for a string, as we've just discussed about with booleans, you have to start with double quotes, and then you can have anything within it, and you have to end with double quotes. So it's key to know that if you have a number written in a string, so if you have double quotes, say 30, ending with a double quote, and you're trying to add 25 to it, then you won't get 55. You'll just get an error because you're trying to add a sentence with a number that just doesn't work. Alright, so let's move on to the next slide. So we've just talked about variable declaration. Let's just go through it in brief again. So a variable stores data, it's paired with a name, and then it contains a value. So as we've just discussed, so now variable declaration, as we've already talked about, you have in Python your variable name, space equals, preferably a space, and then your value. But however, in other programming languages, for example, as you can see, Java, you have to give your data type name, so like your data type, then space, and then give your variable name, and then equals, and then you have to give your value, and that value has to be according to the data type that you've just put at the front of that statement, and then you end in semicolon due to the syntax of Java. This may be seen as an advantage so that your variable name your variable always stays at a constant data type. So this might be seen as an advantage by defining the data type of the variable, it stays constant. So you can't change your age to a sentence in future. In the case of Python, you can say age equals to a string, for example, and then it will just get overridden. You won't have anything saying, oh, you can't do this. And then let's quickly look at constant declaration. So constants store data like variables, but the difference is that the value after the statement is given, you can't change it later on. like I've just talked about with variables, you can change what the variable equals later on in the program after you define it. But with constants, you can't. Once you've said age equals 25, you can't change it. And then these are very useful for fixed values. So again, for maybe the value of pi to maybe like 5 decimal places or so. So constant declaration in Python is a bit weird because by convention you can only do it by writing in all caps. But in Java, as you can see here, it's more clear. You say final, and then you have the rest of your syntax to declare a variable. And also you don't have to use capital letters. It's just preferred to use capital letters in Java. And also your variable names, also known as identifier names, should be kept meaningful. So it improves your code readability, which helps in maintaining the code and makes it easier for people to understand your code. So before we end, let me just go quickly head to VS Code and show you what concatenation is. So here I'm at VS Code. So let me just try to print something over here. For example, 1 plus 5.7. Alright, so 1 is an integer, 5.7 is a float. And if I run this, I should expect to get 6.7. Alright, so here you can see I have 6.7. And then also, if I try to do this with a string, okay, you won't get 6.7, you'll get an error because you're trying to add a number with a sentence and you can't do that. So what if you try to do a string with a string, anything like that, you'll get a concatenation. So it will just put the whole thing together. Alright, so you see the first value is over here, and then your second value just goes on to the end. Alright, so I can say anything over here. I can say hello, anything, and then if I run that, as you can see here, it just gets joined onto the end. So when you do this, when you do addition on two non-numerical values, you call it concatenation because it's not actually adding both of those values together, it's just joining them together. So that's it for this video. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you found it useful, then share it, and then don't forget to subscribe.